What up, Wizards? It's Dev from The Place, and today I cooked up one of your favorites. It's a good old down-home deck tech, and this one I've been kind of addicted to for the last couple of weeks. I gotta admit, I was a little surprised when the patrons chose mono Black Aggro, but I shouldn't have been. I know you little freaks by now. You never met a mono black deck that you didn't like, so I shouldn't be too shocked that we're here. But now that we are, I'm super happy because I've been playing this one for a couple of weeks and I've never had as much fun. I knew the patrons had taste. As usual, you guys were right. This deck just kind of has it all, man. Best removal package in standard, some really good card draw, and some really good dudes at all the curvy spots, just like your sister. This deck has been a blast to play for the last couple of weeks, and today I finally get to talk about it. Let's go.
And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech.
And we're back. Real quick, first off, YouTube stuff. Make sure that you submarine the sandwich, and of course, lick the video. But let's go ahead and get into it. We got a lot to cover. So I want to tell you that first off, we're playing for Rot-Curse Rakshasa. It's not worth $10, but it should be. It won me more games than like anything else. Hell, I'd go so far as to say that it forms a shell. Just 4 copies of this and a few more removal spells. You got yourself a deck, kid. Go to F&M and wreck, kid. Mono red and Corey Still Cutter get disrespected. But check this out, just so you know what I'm talking about. It's a 2-mana 5/5 trampler with Decayed. Wow, but it's also got this harmonize ability. You use it on your opponent's dudes and it decreases their agility so they can't block. Get them with your dudes and then they get rocked. Put them in the Vulcan death grip like Dr. Spock, that's all. I'm just give you a taste for now. I'm not doing the whole thing like that, but enough people have been asking for it lately that I might as well give you a few bars. But my stars, this dude is the noodles in the pasta. Get him popping and fizzing like Shasta. Just play for Rot-Curse Rakshasa. I gotta stop it. I do in fact have to stop, but bottom line, just play the Black Ball Lightning with the ridiculous graveyard ability. But that's not the only new card from Tarkir that strikes fear into opponents' hearts whenever they hear its name. Apparently whenever I start speaking in rhyme, I can't stop. So get a bucket and a mop, because it's time for Sinkhole Surveyor. We're playing 4 copies of this card, which is about how many jokes I wrote down for it and then discarded immediately because I'm pretty sure they'd get me demonetized. The one I finally landed on is, oh, its job is to look at sinkholes. That means it goes nicely with your mom, whose job is to show. I think I probably would still get demonetized for that, never mind. But let's try to talk about what this card actually does without rhyming even once. What's the point of living in the world? But anyway, in case you wanted straight information, this guy is 2 mana for a thing that, for the cost of 1 life per turn, puts a 1/1 into play, which is reminiscent of some fairly strong cards throughout Magic's history. But honestly, more often than that, I find myself just growing it every single turn. 2 mana for effectively a 2/4 flyer by the time it attacks the first time is a really good rate just in and of itself. But, by the time it becomes a 4/6 or a 5/7 flyer, it's just beating in face and winning games. Did I fail the rhyme challenge on accident just then? A 2/4 flyer is a pretty good rate. When it's a 5/7, then it's just winning games. That's sort of, you can make that a rhyme. I think I screwed it up. Either way, the card is really good. And along with Rot-Curse Rakshasa, I was kind of surprised that so many new cards from Tarkir Dragonstorm went into this deck. But this deck keeps getting more and more new cards every single set. We're playing Ether Drift cards in here, which was the last set. We're playing more new cards from Tarkir Dragonstorm in this deck. Haven't even talked about all of them yet. So again, it's just getting cards at a really good clip, and this is one of the best ones that it's gotten in the last few sets. Again, this can win games just by itself if left unchecked. Might as well show you the other new card from Tarkir that we're playing. It's a couple of copies of Carcy Revenant, a very relevant Revenant, in fact, man. This thing gains us a lot of life back, which is really important in a deck that sacrifices so much of its own life. And even if it's not doing the life gaining for you, something else is. Once it's in the graveyard, it does die to a lot of played removal in the format, but once it is dead, it's not quite done. Even if all you're using the counters on is like 1 attack step from a Rot-Curse Rakshasa, you'd be surprised how much that swing in life can matter. Also goes pretty nicely with a Sinkhole Surveyor. Like, sure, it already has flying, but giving it the lifelink makes it gain back all the life that the Surveyor has lost you that game in one fell swoop usually, and that's a huge deal. So yeah, this is great, but I'm only playing a couple of copies because I wanted to make room for some other really important 3-drops in this deck. But this card goes well with those 3-drops. We're playing 4 copies of Gix, Yawgmoth Praetor, man. Mr. G is perfect for this deck. It's basically an enduring curiosity that has 25% discount. We will play that. But again, back to specifically Carcy Revenant, these cards work together like cream cheese and pastry, man. Again, not only are you gaining all that life back, just like I talked about with Sinkhole Surveyor, but in this case, you can give a creature flying, getting it through more easily for combat damage, thus drawing more cards off Gix. You can just put the counters on Gix and gain a bunch of life. That's a fair number of power and toughness right there. So just a sick little combination, but Gix is obviously great for this deck because we have a fair number of creatures with evasion. We've already seen Carcy Revenant and Skittering Surveyor, but we got a few more flyers in here before it's all said and done. Like, for example, Deep Cavern Bat. We're playing all 4 copies of our old friend DCB here because, of course, we are. Why not play 4 copies of what is perhaps the best black creature in the entire format? I don't even know if that's a controversial statement. I just think it's true. And it does work really well with Mtg. You know, like on turn 2, playing this and grabbing their removal spell into a turn 3 Gix, that's probably forced more concessions than any other sequence in the deck. But obviously Bartok's going to be good regardless of whether or not we ever see Gix in a game. Again, just taking their removal spell or just the thing that blows us out most of the time is going to lead to a lot of games won. But we got to play kind of a lot of 1-drops in this deck, but I want to keep playing flyers, and I think the best solution is to play 3 copies of Fairy Dream Thief over here. I'm not on a full playset, but I do think that 3 is correct, despite all the other amazing 1-drops that we could play in this thing. You know, I didn't even end up on, like, Tiny Bones. There's a number of, like, 2-power black 1-drops that I could have played, like Forsaken Miner didn't even end up in this deck. But all that said, I do think that Dream Thief is the right call, mostly because of the Gix, but again, even without the Gix, this is guaranteed damage and eventually a drawn card, which an aggro deck wants. I'll also take the ETB Surveil, man. Like, an aggro deck really needs to blow past land pockets and make sure that its next draw is as good as possible in the first few turns of the game. So again, I think Fairy Dream Thief is the right call here, even though it looks like one of the softer 1-drops that we're playing in this deck. It turned out to actually be one of the best, but if you want a 4-of 1-drop, I'm playing all 4 Gas Guzzler in here. First of all, a little bit more flying synergy. With all of our flyers, it's actually really easy to increase our speed super fast in this deck, and once we do, this is yet another thing beyond just Dream Thief or Gix that draws us cards in this deck. So again, tons of strong card draw in our aggro deck, which is a nice attribute. This will always be decent to just drop on turn 1, get your speed going as early in the game as you can, and it's just Savannah Lions. It's just, I can never complain about a Savannah Lions. That's why I'm playing a bunch of them. I'm also on 2 copies of Cult Conscript over here. I think it's nice to have a Savannah Lions we can play out of our graveyard, and it's the only skeleton in the deck, so it's not going to be too hard to bring it back. That gives us a total of 9 1-drops, and I would honestly really like to play 10, but I also really wanted to make room for some of the best removal that Standard has to offer, plus a little secret weapon that's not so secret, and it's actually existed since like 1998. It's been printed into basically every Standard since then, it feels like, at least, and you definitely know the card exists, but I don't know that you think you should be playing this many copies in the main deck. We'll get to it in just a second. I like to tease things. As far as our removal goes, we're just playing 4 Throat Goats and 4 cut downs. It's actually 3 cut downs. It was 4 forever, and I moved 1 to the sideboard, but still, 4 Go for the Throats and 3 cut downs is enough to take care of most other, especially aggro decks in the format. Weirdly, these are some of the most expensive cards in the deck, which is really strange, but it's definitely worth it to pick them up. But onto that secret weapon that you definitely know exists. It's 3 copies of Duress in the main deck here. And the more I play the deck, the more I'm convinced the actual number of main deck copies you should be running is 6, right? But it's against the rules, so maybe cap out at 4 if you can find room for it, right? I've considered heavily just docking a land from this deck in playing a Fort Duress in the main. It has been that good in just about every single game. One cool thing about Duress is that you can play it on turn 1, on the play, and that is really, really good in this environment where you can take out things like Storm Chaser's Talent on turn 1 or Hopeless Nightmare on turn 1 and never really have to deal with them again, and that's great. But even if you're on the draw, you still get to take things like, say, Corey Steel Cutter out of their opening hand before they get to play it, and most discard spells in Standard aren't going to do that. As a matter of fact, hand destruction is kind of one of the only ways that Black really has of taking care of certain permanent types, and sometimes the best way to do it is before they ever hit the table. And it just so happens that taking out a Storm Chaser's Talent or a Corey Steel Cutter is going to completely cut the legs out from under any of the decks that you're taking those cards from. But then, of course, there's just the traditional uses for Duress. You know what I mean? You could take Sweepers out of the opponent's hand, or, again, important enchantments, Caretaker's Talent, and stuff like that. Important artifacts like Urabrass Forge that would otherwise just mow us down. There is so much that Duress can do right now. Take that Kaito out of their hand in the blue-black deck. I've done that a bunch of times. Up the Beanstalk. You know, you can sit here and name cards that Duress just completely nerfs on turn 1, like kind of all day. It's a really strong card in Standard, and I highly recommend that you stack your deck with copies of it if you're playing Swamps. As a matter of fact, I'll go so far as to say, it's one of the best reasons to play Swamps in Standard right now. Bro talking like he just learned what Duress is. No, I've been playing Duress since the sideboard of Yawgmoth's Bargain. Like, it's been a long time that I've known Duress. We're like this, son, but I just don't know that Duress has been this good in recent memory. So yes, I'm devoting some time to it here. That's because I really want to hammer in how good this card was. Here are the lands. One of the more boring mana bases that we've had to cover in a while. Just 21 Swamps and a couple of Soulstone Sanctuaries, but you can sub those out with Mishra's Foundries or, whatever creature lands you have laying around. But I think you do need a couple of creature lands in the deck. But here's the sideboard. Aforementioned Cut Down and aforementioned Duress. I've been taking out Dream Thief for the Cut Down and Carcy Revenant for the Duress, just so you know. But there's some weird stuff in here, like the couple of copies of Desperate Measures. This can function as kind of a Village Rites pseudo Skull Clamp activation even on some of our guys, and it's not a bad combat trick against aggro decks, but it can also take out some of the creatures that aggro decks are playing. So if we're up against mono red or anything playing small dudes, then Desperate Measures will come in. But there's also 4 copies of Ghost Vacuum, just play all 4 copies of Ghost Vacuum. That's another one I kind of want to hammer in just as much as I wanted to hammer in Duress. I think you could probably get away with main deck copies of Ghost Vacuum in this format right now. Not only is this card really good against Omniscience, but it's also great against the Abhorrent Oculus decks, and both of those decks have recently risen back into real prominence, at least on MTGO. So if you're playing against any of those, then of course you want to pack some Ghost Vacuums. We've also got 3 Feed the Swarm in here. This can take out enchantments once they hit the table, which is something that black can't always do. I'm not on Withering Torment, which is kind of this card's cousin. I feel like we just want to keep the curve down as low as possible, so I'm on 3 Feed the Swarm, and most of the time if we're blowing up, up the Beanstalks and Storm Chaser's talents and stuff like that, we're not losing too much life to this anyway, and we've got enough life gain in the deck. We don't really have to worry about Feed the Swarm as far as it's punching us in the mouth, but still, we need something that takes out enchantments because that's a really important permanent type right now. And this ain't Get Lost, but it'll do. We're also playing 2 copies of Bandit's Talent for when we're up against more removal heavy decks or things that are more likely to play sweepers and stuff. We need something that's going to provide some amount of reach for us that doesn't force us to attack for it, and this is a good option. I'm also on 1 Phyrexian Arena in here. Not sure this is the exact right way to use this slot, but I felt that we needed kind of a 5th copy of Gix for all intents and purposes. When we're up against those like slower, more, sweepy matchups, it's nice to have a little bit more card advantage. But I'm also on 1 Gix's Command. I was on 2, but I find that 5 mana is just a little bit too much for this, even out of the board. But again, if we're getting swept a lot, or if we're in a kind of control-y matchup, then Gix's Command, once actually resolved, could be a pretty decent little coup of a card to hit. But let's go straight to them power rankings. Yeah, usually this is where I would tell you about either some cards I didn't end up playing, or maybe, a little budget option. But in this case, there weren't a whole lot of cards I didn't end up playing. I guess Sheldred the Apocalypse and a few 1-drops I could have otherwise played. Maybe Caustic Bronco, you want an excuse on that one? I don't know, there's just better 2-drops now, finally. But either way, there just weren't a whole lot of cards that I felt were worthy of pointing out that I didn't end up playing. If you want to shove some Sheldreds in the deck because you have some in your collection, maybe a copy can go in the sideboard instead of either the Arena or the Gix's Command. I don't know, do you, buddy. I think that this deck needs a relatively low curve, and I think we've hit it just about where it needs to be. Surprise, I like the deck that I built. It actually kind of doesn't happen enough, to be honest. And as far as budget concerns go, well, it's kind of already budget. This deck's like $75 with the sideboard to order right now, and the sideboard cost at least $16 because of the 4 Ghost Vacuums. So I guess, if you don't want to include the sideboard, this deck's around $50 to buy right now. And that is really not a bad deal for a deck that just sliced through just about every other aggro deck in the format. I mean, it's got some kind of low scores here, as you may have noticed. It's not the most versatile deck in the world, especially before you can access the sideboard. And it doesn't have the most synergy. I mean, it's got a couple of synergistic things. Is that a word? With like Gix, we got Flyers. Is that really synergy? I'm not too sure, but it's not really a synergy deck. It's a punch you in the teeth as hard as it can deck, and it does that really well. It's got great offense and, again, great defense. Not only the cut downs and the go for the throats, but also the fact that we're gaining a bunch of our life back and we can duress the opponent in the main deck all contributes to that number. There just aren't really a lot of holes in this one, kind of surprisingly, and that leads to a final score of 68. Almost nice, but honestly, pretty nice. It's a really fun deck to mess around with, and you'd be surprised how quick it can take you up that ladder. And if you still don't believe me, I brought an example game as usual. Don't worry, it's enough for the entire class. This one I recorded a ton of games with, but I, at the end, could really only choose one game. I guess I could have chosen like 3 or 4, but I like to choose one that exemplifies the deck. And even though this one ended up kind of against a weird deck, this is definitely the game I recorded that kind of showcased a lot of our newer cards' abilities. So that's the one I wanted to show you. Here we go. Now we're on the draw here against a cool little green-white artifacts deck, which is kind of a weird deck to showcase our gameplay against here. But again, I chose this game mostly because you get to see Rot-Curse Rakshasa and Sinkhole Surveyor do their thing. Now, we run out Cold Conscript on our turn 1, attack with it into this Yoshin Dissident they just played, knowing that's too important of a creature for them to block with. So we can run out now our Sinkhole Surveyor and get it going as early in the game as possible. Opponent plays a Dollmaker Shop into a Novice Inspector. Good turn here because they get to grow the Dissident twice. Knock on the door with it. We're going to go ahead and let it in and go to 17. We can just know where to run that Dissident on this turn. It's an important creature to remove, but we also position a cut down because we may have to use it. We deliberate for a second and put a counter on the Sinkhole Surveyor. Opponent is going to take the block on the Cold Conscript with the Novice Inspector. That kind of forces the cut down in my mind. They go down to just 1 doll on their side of the table, which won't trigger their Dollmaker Shop, but they have another Yoshin Dissident and a Skrelv. Another great turn from our opponent, and they grow their Dissident with the Skrelv. They just use the Go for the Throat on the Dissident. It's a really important creature to remove, especially before they have Skrelv up. But we've run down a Rot-Curse Rakshasa and continue to grow our Sinkhole Surveyor. Opponent blocks the Conscript with a doll, but we don't really care. We'll get it back later, and we know that. On this opponent's turn, they're just going to pop a Clue, but then they're going to get a Teething Wormlet. Not a bad draw whatsoever, especially with that Skrelv up now. But this turn, we're going to look at playing Gas Guzzler and stuff and just decide to go ahead and get in. This time around, we're going to make a guy with the Sinkhole Surveyor just to kind of make sure that opponent doesn't get too far into our life total, basically. But our Rot-Curse Rakshasa decays and we get Fairy Dream Thief surveilling, and that means that we get to pitch a swamp into our yard, which is a good feeling. We already kind of have too many. We're going to run out Gas Guzzler now, and we can even play the Cold Conscript out of our yard. Look at that board late in the game for an aggro deck. It's not too late for opponent, though. They have Bright Glass Gearhulk this turn, and they can tutor into a Haywire Might. So they're getting a board, but it's still not quite enough. All we really have to do on our final turn is grow the Surveyor, and we're more or less guaranteed to get in for enough damage. But what we're going to do here is play Rot-Curse Rakshasa out of our yard and target the Teething Wormlet and the Bright Glass Gearhulk. Opponent might want to protect one of these creatures with Skrelv so it can block. That makes sense. They end up choosing the Teething Wormlet, but the interesting thing about this is that if they do this, they're going to have to go down to 5 because they're tapped out. They do so, and that also guarantees they're going to take lethal damage this turn. So good game, opponent. And again, good game to the opponent there. Bless you for being out there trying to do cool stuff, but that's basically the deck. It's a pretty simple deck, right? But especially with all these new cards, it's more effective than it's been in a long time. That's basically Itski Lewitsky. Special thanks to the patrons for picking this one. Wasn't sure you guys were going to, but because you did, I got to kind of have the time of my life for the last couple of weeks. So hope you get a chance to play it. It is, in fact, a blast, but again, that's Alski Kowalski. Just do all the YouTube stuff on your way out. Hit the button shaped like a thumb. You can submarine the sandwich because, again, trying to get to 150K and we're only like 13,000 away. That's not that bad. So if everyone watching this video sub to the channel right now, we might get as much as 27 new subscribers. That'd be nice. But in any case, you can also check out the Patreon if you want to help choose what decks we do around here and you want to be one of them people that's responsible for delivering mono black aggro to YouTube. You realize those people affected YouTube history, what power that is, and for just $1 a month, you'd be helping me out a lot, and you'd also get just a little bit of power, which is a pretty important commodity in today's world when you really think about it. Just who has power? You. We'll have some for just $1 a month. But anyway, that's basically all I got for this one, guys. That is, I'm donezo for this onezo. I think it's the one I haven't used yet. So I'll see you guys later, and I will catch you cats later. I'm Dev from the place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.